So today is September 14th, Feast of the Exaltation of the Cross, and happy feast day to everyone. We're going to record this in case someone wants to come back and take a look at it, and we will begin. So, as you know, we've been through this period of unnormal things, unusual things, and we won't necessarily go into all the things that are going on, but I just wanted to work with you so that we can actually come up and continue a church school at home, and that's the title of this short presentation. Throughout the summer, I was pondering how to do this in the hopes of this would be somewhere back to we could start to do things on a regular and safe basis among all the different components of the society and the church, and being compassionate and loving to each other. But obviously, as we know, this is not where we are yet. So we decided, the clergy and I met a few weeks ago, and we went through some of the results of the survey of went out to the parish in August, and we talked about it, and we came up with a plan where we would have church school at home. And it's actually probably something we should be doing at all time. And it's actually back to our roots of the Orthodox Church, going back to ancient times where where the school was at home, and not just the church school, but almost all schooling was done at home. And so this is not a departure from anything abnormal. This is actually a return to things that we should be doing at all the time. So I'm just going to start first with a quote from St. John. I'll give you a minute to read it, but this has always been a quote that has stuck with me even before I was a parent. And it stuck with me because it says everything else is secondary. So all the things that we think about and we hope for our children, we have to have a primary concern for them. And St. John brings this out with this quote, that we need to instruct our children in the teaching of the Lord. And that should be paramount in everything that we do. So if that's the paramount thing to do, whose responsibility is it to educate our children? And let me just say, if you have questions along the way, please stop and we'll have questions. We'll have time at the end of questions if you don't have to leave. So whose responsibility is it? Well, as a church, as a family, as God's children, we are all responsible for educating children. Either we do this personally or we do corporately. But who are those people? Obviously, it's the priests and the clergy, the Sunday school teachers, parish council. Sometimes we don't think that the parish council does educate, but through their efforts and through their diligence, they show us how to care for the church. The choir and their singing, all of the music that they sing, and the theology that they're singing. That's an education in itself. The ministry leaders, our Matthew 25, our TLC. How do we care for each other? How do we care for our community? Senior citizens. We have a decent amount of senior citizens, and it's always a beautiful thing to see them because it's of their dedication and their love when they can make it. And we have to look to them, and they have knowledge, they have wisdom that they have experienced in the church that they can share with us. The sick and the suffering. How do we look at the sick and the suffering, and how can they share it with us? How can they teach us? And if we stopped and thought about it, there's so much tremendous things that we can learn from someone who's sick and suffering, because they teach us how to trust in God. And there are a lot of other ways that there are people who can be teaching us. But mostly it's the parents. I'm just going to let you read for a second here, and there's just some quotes that I found that I thought were appropriate. This being the longest one. Now, what's interesting about this was the author. Um, I'll ask a question, but I'll rhetorically ask this. If you think back, if you think about who might have said this and when it was said, um, I think you could say this is probably, very pertinent to us today, the speaker of this. But it really was St. John again. And he said this 1600 years ago in Byzantium. He lived during a time that's not so unfamiliar to us. There was big cities, there was a lot of bad things that are happening among society. There was, divorce, there was sexual things that were going on. And he was speaking to the people 1600 years ago, and these words make perfect sense to us today. He spoke against secular education, and he spoke against secular education not because it was bad, but because things that were being learned in those secular schools were horrible. They were teaching homosexual types of things. So we have to look at this and say, this is, again, going back to what I said earlier, that we have a model for us that was presented early in the church. And so we want to go back to this, at least for this period of time, and at least for the first semester here, and we'll see where we go from that. So where do we start? First, we have to start in our homes, being comfortable with God ourselves. We have to be able to say that children need to know that we care about God, that everything we do is based upon a Christian lifestyle. And the big thing is that we're not partial about, nothing's partial about being a Christian. We have to actually understand that our whole life needs to revolve about being a Christian. It's not a cafeteria style lifestyle. We make our decisions, we base them upon our Christian principles, our beliefs and our faith, and how God has shown us to live. Again, the home is the most natural place to teach. And as parents, we're called to service, we're called to be witness bearers, and we need to lead by example. And in the bottom, you can see, this is a quote from Albert Schweitzer. He said, it's not just the main way, it's the only way. How many times have we done something and we look at it and think, what are my kids going to do? I can give the example that, before I was a parent, didn't think much about it. But when we started to go to amusement parks or to movies, and they would have a child entrance fee. And I would think about it, saying, well, he's only 12, and the cutoff is 11. We can fit him in. No one will ask the question. Or go to a movie, you get it, go in for the child's fare and not the whole fare. Or, we get on the highway and we may go over the speed limit. But it's the same way. We have to look at it and say, what would they think when they're in that same position? Obviously, the answer is going to be mom and dad did it. So we have to always be conscious of the examples that are sending out. And we need to take care of that example in each and every action that we take. It's a hard thing to do because we want to separate being the Christian from living in society. But if we're going to lead our children in the way we want them to be led, we have to be the example. Okay. I'm just going to flash these up. And again, this is not a test. This is just I'm going to call this a self-inventory. And I'll give you a few seconds to read it. And if you could go on a scale of 1 to 10, just take the test. And the test is in general, we're in a period of time that some of the questions may not fit, but just think about how you generally would do this if we were, a year ago or hopefully a year ahead. So the first one is 1 to 10. I present this because it just gives us a sense of what we're doing, how we're doing this. And again, it goes back to the example. Are these the things that my children see? Are these the things that I want them to see? And this gives us, as I said, it's an inventory. We need to look at this and say, can I work on this? Is it important to me? Do I not need to work? Or do I do these things? We hope that, when you come to a 10, that it would be that important to you. So when do we start? This is pretty easy. All of us on this call here all have older children, so bedtime is probably something hopefully we've all done growing up with them. But still, we can still go by them before they fall asleep, talk to them a little bit, talk to them about the things that we want to talk about. We all have one-on-one time with them, family time. The big one is mealtime. This is so important to us because not only do we have a family meal, corporately in the church we have the church meal, we have the mystical supper, the body and blood of Jesus Christ. So mealtime is so important to us, and you can see that in the last question it was asked at least 5 times a day, because studies have found that if by doing it that often, it has a true reflection on how they're being raised. Obviously, when we get together, we go to family, friends, and we visit, we eat. Food is always part of that, all that sharing time. So mealtime is a real big one. Go on vacations. I'll just say, when we went on a vacation, a couple days, one day, and one was 3 days, and it was just a good time that we were in all of this. It was all local. We stayed, within Pennsylvania and all that type of thing. But it was a good time just to go away, and we were able to talk about some things that sometimes, you're stuck in the car driving. That gives us a good time to do that. Holiday, Pascha, Easter, Thanksgiving, all those things. Television and movie time. Sometimes we don't, it's hard to do this during this time, but sometimes they pick movies, or they want to watch something or do something on their computer. It's a good time to use that as a learning lesson. As I said, most of our children here are a little bit older, but I sat down with one of our children. They were watching a movie or a television show they always watch, and I heard of it. I kind of knew of it, but when I sat there, it raised a lot of questions, and so it made an opportunity for me to ask the question of them. Do you understand what's going on? Do you understand this lifestyle? Do you know why they're saying that? And it gave us some, good conversation to be able to talk about what we see, what the world sees, and how we are supposed to interpret it. Chore time. That's always fun to talk to them about during chores. Activity time, bike riding, hiking, coloring, whatever we do. Sometimes just spend time with them and spend with them. Teaching time. You'll see in the next slide or so that teaching time is time that you may want to set aside and just sit and talk to them so they understand it's teaching time. It's not distracted by anything else. This church school at home is not intended to be a 30-minute, 60-minute, Tuesday night, Sunday morning, whatever. It's intended to try to encompass these different times where you can start and encompass into it. There will need to be some teaching time because you have to have some background and sit with them so they understand where you're going with the topic. So here's where we're going to. What will Sunday school be doing for you? So in the next week or so, we'll start to send out teaching packets. It'll be in the email. It'll be every 2 to 3 weeks. And each teaching packet will have some general type of information on a topic and some more in-depth information. And it will not be a curriculum that we will say, as we do in our Sunday school today, where we start, like I teach the Acts of the Apostles. We're going to teach all the Acts of Apostles. Or we're going to teach in some of the younger grades divine liturgy or just the sacraments. This is going to be a mix of different topics that you can talk to them about. But and hopefully will give you enough information to go through that. Some of this, you may have all of these things, it may have just a few of them, and there may be other topics that are in there. The one thing that I'm hoping to do is that we will include feast day and saints with each one of them. And I'm going to try to align that to the feast. Right now, we just had a major feast today. Next major feast is in November. So we have a little bit of time in there, but we have some minor feasts in there, which we can talk about also. What will you do? This first one is important because you have to sit and think about how you're going to use this. Am I going to throw it in the car and pick it up? You know, something to do. Can I do this after they get done with their school work? Can I do this on a Saturday morning for a few minutes? So you have to try to familiarize and get the content. And the things that you will see in the links particularly, you may spend a long time reading those, and that's okay because that's edification for an education for all of us. But at the same time, it will give you the background so when they ask questions, you will be familiar with the contents that you can do. Develop your plan on delivery. Where are you going to do it? When will you do it? Who are you going to do it with? If you have multiple children, you're going to do one-on-one, maybe bring them together, maybe you have older ones talk to that. And then think about what you see and how you can enhance into your own particular child or your children. What would they excite them or get them interested in what's being shared? Again, all those topics are in there that I showed you. It's going to be every 2 to 3 weeks, just so you have content so you can sit and speak with them for some period of time. This might be 5 minutes a day, might be 25 minutes, it might be going to pick them up at ballet and so forth. But that's, you have to figure out how am I going to do this. And then you can think about incense, just think about incense in church. Why do we use incense? What's the background to incense? Why is it important? When is it used? Where does it come from? All those types of things. One of the things that I'll be sending will be something about incense. So, we smell it, we like it, but teach your children. And then if you have feedback, things that you would like to hear or see, just feed it back, or things that can be improved of, just send them back to me and we'll try to correct this or make it better or add to it. Final thoughts. Most importantly, think about and pray what you want your children to know. It's sometimes you have to say, what are my core values? What do I really need to be doing with my child? How do I work with them? And you have to pray and think about that. We sometimes we think we just want to raise nice kids, have moral kids. Well, certainly we want that, but that's not what we really want. We want them to believe and fall in love with God and Jesus Christ. That's what we want. We want to have eternal salvation for them. And so we have to think about that. How can we help them do that? Share with them your thoughts. Share with other parents and so forth your thoughts about what's happening and how we can do this. As I said earlier, parents are teaching children is the true model. This is what we should be doing. This should be nothing new to any of us, but it's going to be different in the sense that it's going to be delivered by you, and we'll help as best as we can. And the last thing is just about Zooming. One of the methods that we talked about was delivering this on a Zoom call, and I think I can say this specifically about my children, both in college and in high school. They're taking all or most of their classes online, and after 6.5 hours, at least for the high school, 6.5 hours sitting in front of a screen from 8 o'clock, 8:40 to 3:40. It's a long day, and I think they're zoomed out, and I think we all may be zoomed out if we're working from home. Not that we would preclude having any kind of Zoom fellowship meetings, but it's mostly about not to overburden you to set things up, or mostly not to overburden them, because I think I hear this word phrase now that we're not calling them teenagers, we're calling them screenagers because they're spending so much time in front of the screen. So I'm hoping that we refrain from doing any kind of teaching for now. There are OCA web classes, which I will include in there in the packages that you can join and watch in Zooming and different types of things. I didn't say this earlier. The one thing I did want to say is the packages that will be delivered are going to be geared mostly from middle school down to the elementary school. So as I said, there's be some general things, there'll be some activities for young kids, more conversational things for older kids. The high school class, I'm hoping that we're going to have a few in-person classes. We're working that out. We'll be following all the precautions if they're outside to stay apart, inside masks and things like that. So we're working through that. But I am hoping that I'm going to also be able to work with them so they'll have at least a continuity of subjects throughout the fall session here. And so the last thing is you give feedback if you can to me. I have this twice. We'll go past it. Thanks. But I leave this again with the first quote that I have in there. Everything else is secondary to our raising of our children. So hopefully we'll be able to do this. And I'm kind of excited to put some of these things together. I know it's going to be a little bit convoluted to start with, but hopefully by the time we get rolling, we'll be back in regular class, hopefully, but it'll be better as we move forward. One thing I did think about during the Christmas period time, maybe we will have a whole group type of activity, and then I'll share that when I be able to work through that a little bit better so that everybody can have one activity to work on. So thank you. If there are any questions.